Hey there, welcome back to Book Demystified. I'm really glad you're here because today's book, Love Your Life, Not Theirs by Rachel Cruze, dives into something we've all experienced but rarely talk about openly. You know that moment when you're scrolling through Instagram at 11 p.m., seeing your college friends' vacation photos from Bali, and suddenly your perfectly fine apartment feels like a cardboard box? Or when you're at Target buying groceries and you see someone your age loading up a cart with organic everything while you're calculating whether you can afford name-brand cereal this week? That feeling in your stomach isn't just envy, it's your financial future getting hijacked by someone else's highlight reel. I've been there, staring at my phone, wondering how everyone else seems to have it figured out while I'm over here eating ramen and pretending it's a lifestyle choice. But here's the thing that hit me when I first read Rachel's book. What if the problem isn't that we don't make enough money or that we're bad with budgets? What if the real problem is that we're trying to fund a life that was never meant to be ours in the first place? Rachel Cruze, who grew up watching her dad, Dave Ramsey, help millions of people get out of debt, has spent years studying why smart, hardworking people keep making the same money mistakes over and over again. And what she found wasn't pretty, but it was eye-opening. We're not just spending money, we're spending our peace of mind, our relationships, and our actual dreams to keep up with people who might not even be as happy as they look online. Why does this keep happening in our lives? And what if there's a real answer we've been missing all along? Well, this book has something powerful to say about that, and I promise by the end of this video, you're going to see your money and your life in a completely different way. Rachel starts with a story that'll probably sound familiar. She talks about a friend who seemed to have everything together: the perfect house, the designer clothes, the exotic vacations plastered all over social media. This friend was living what looked like the American dream, except for one tiny detail. She was drowning in debt, and her marriage was falling apart from the financial stress. But from the outside, scrolling through her posts, you'd think she had won the lottery of life. Rachel realized this friend was living what she calls comparison-driven spending, making financial decisions not on what she actually wanted or could afford, but on what would make her life look as good as everyone else's online. It's like we're all actors in a play we never auditioned for, trying to memorize lines written by people we don't even know, spending money we don't have to impress people who aren't even paying attention. Think about your last major purchase, that new phone, those shoes, the streaming subscriptions, or even the coffee you bought this morning. How much of that decision was about what you actually needed versus what you thought you should want? Rachel calls this the comparison trap, and she says it's the #1 reason why people who make good money still feel broke all the time. Here's what really got me thinking. She points out that social media has turned everyone into advertisers for a lifestyle they can't afford. We're not just competing with our neighbors anymore. We're competing with everyone, everywhere, all at once. Your high school classmate who became a doctor, your cousin who married rich, that influencer who makes everything look effortless. They're all in your pocket 24/7, showing you what your life could look like if only you spent a little more, upgraded a little more, tried a little harder to keep up. But here's the truth bomb Rachel drops early in the book. Most of the people you're trying to keep up with are just as stressed about money as you are. They're just better at hiding it behind a filter and a caption. The first major concept Rachel introduces is what she calls contentment. And I'm not going to lie, when I first read this, I thought, great, another book telling me to be grateful for my student loans and my tiny apartment. But that's not what she means at all. Rachel defines contentment as the ability to be genuinely happy with your life without needing constant upgrades, updates, or external validation. She tells this story about going to a friend's house for dinner and spending the entire evening obsessing over their kitchen renovation instead of enjoying the conversation and the meal. She realized she had trained herself to scan every environment for what she was missing instead of appreciating what was right in front of her. This hit me hard because I recognize myself in that story. How many times have I been somewhere beautiful with people I love, but spent the whole time thinking about what I didn't have instead of enjoying what I did have?
Contentment isn't about settling or giving up on your dreams, Rachel explains. It's about learning to separate your actual values from the noise of what everyone else thinks you should want.
She introduces this exercise where you write down the 5 things that matter most to you in life. Not what should matter, not what your parents think should matter, but what actually lights you up and makes you feel alive. Then you look at your bank statement from last month and see how much of your money went toward those 5 things versus how much went toward trying to look like someone else's version of success. For most people, Rachel found, there's a huge gap between what they say they care about and where they actually spend their money. One woman Rachel worked with said family time was her top priority. But when they looked at her spending, most of her money went to working overtime to pay for a fancy car that required her to work even more overtime to afford the payments. She was literally paying money to spend less time with the people she cared about most. Hey, if you're getting value from these summaries and want to help us keep going, you can support us in a few simple ways. Subscribe, join as a member, or grab the book using our affiliate link below. And if you're feeling generous, you can even leave a tip via PayPal or UPI. All links are in the description. Every bit helps us bring you more like this. So Rachel's solution isn't to become a monk and give up everything you enjoy. It's to get really clear about what actually makes you happy versus what you think should make you happy. She talks about this concept called values-based spending, which sounds fancy, but it's actually pretty simple. Instead of spending money to solve emotional problems or to keep up appearances, you spend money in ways that align with what you actually care about. If you value travel and experiences, maybe that means driving an older car so you can take that trip to Europe you've been dreaming about. If you value security and peace of mind, maybe that means living in a smaller place so you can build up your emergency fund. If you value creativity and learning, maybe that means skipping the expensive dinners out so you can afford that photography class or that woodworking workshop. The key is making sure your money is working for your actual dreams, not someone else's version of what your dream should be. Rachel shares this story about a couple who realized they had been spending thousands of dollars a year on home decorating, not because they loved interior design, but because they felt like their house should look like the ones they saw on Pinterest. When they got honest about it, they realized they would rather spend that money on date nights and weekend getaways, things that actually brought them closer together. Once they stopped trying to make their house look like a magazine and started using their money for experiences they both enjoyed, they felt so much more connected to their life and to each other. The second big idea Rachel explores is what she calls the wealth-building mindset versus the wealth-looking mindset. This one really opened my eyes because I realized I had been thinking about money all wrong for years. The wealth-looking mindset is focused on appearing successful right now, having the right brands, the right car, the right apartment, the right everything, so that people think you've made it. The wealth-building mindset is focused on actually becoming financially secure over time, which often means looking pretty ordinary on the outside while you're building something real on the inside. Rachel tells this incredible story about 2 coworkers who started at the same company on the same day with the same salary. One guy immediately leased a BMW, moved into a luxury apartment, and made sure everyone knew he had arrived. The other guy drove a used Honda, lived with a roommate, and put every extra dollar into paying off his student loans and building a savings. After 5 years, the BMW guy looked more successful, but he was also stressed about money constantly, living paycheck to paycheck despite making good money, and 1 car repair away from financial disaster. The Honda guy looked pretty average, but he had no debt, 6 months of expenses saved, and had started investing for retirement. He was sleeping better at night and had the freedom to take risks in his career because he wasn't trapped by monthly payments. Rachel calls this the difference between looking rich and being rich, and she points out that in America, these 2 things are often completely opposite. The people who look the most successful are often the most financially stressed, while the people who are actually building wealth are usually driving older cars and shopping at Target instead of Nordstrom. This doesn't mean you can never have nice things or that you should feel guilty for wanting them, Rachel explains. It just means timing matters. There's a big difference between buying something nice because you can afford it and buying something nice because you want to look like you can afford it. One builds your confidence and your wealth, other builds your anxiety and your debt.
She introduces this idea of delayed gratification that goes beyond just waiting to buy things. It's about falling in love with the process of becoming financially secure instead of just the appearance of being financially secure. Rachel talks about how our culture has trained us to want everything right now, to believe that if we can't have what we want immediately, we're somehow falling behind or missing out. But she argues that learning to wait, to save, to choose long-term security over short-term gratification is actually one of the most rebellious things you can do in a culture obsessed with instant everything. Think about it. Everyone around you is financing their lifestyle, using credit cards and loans and payment plans to have what they want right now. The person who chooses to save up and pay cash, who chooses to wait until they can actually afford something instead of just afford the payment, is actually the weird one. But Rachel points out that being weird with your money is exactly what allows you to have a normal level of stress about your finances. The third major concept that really changed how I think about money is what Rachel calls the comparison-free budget. Most budgeting advice focuses on tracking every penny and cutting out everything fun, which is why most people hate budgets and give up after a week. But Rachel's approach is different. She starts with your values and works backward from there. Instead of asking what you should spend money on, she asks what you want your life to actually look like, and then figures out how to fund that vision instead of someone else's. She tells the story about a woman who had tried every budgeting app and system but could never stick to any of them. The problem wasn't that she was bad with money, it was that she was trying to live someone else's idea of a perfect budget. Her sister was super frugal and made her feel guilty for spending money on books and coffee. Her coworker was all about investing and made her feel stupid for not maxing out her 401k. Her mom thought she should save for a house even though she loved renting and the flexibility it gave her. This woman was trying to create a budget that would make everyone else happy instead of one that would actually work for her life. Rachel helped her create what she calls a guilt-free spending plan based on her actual priorities. This woman loved reading, learning, and trying new coffee shops around the city, so they built those things into her budget as non-negotiables. She also valued security, so they made sure she was saving consistently, but they didn't worry about maxing out every possible investment account right away. The result was a budget she could actually stick to because it was designed around her real life instead of some theoretical perfect financial life that existed only in her sister's head. Rachel's comparison-free budgeting process starts with 3 simple questions. What do I actually enjoy spending money on? What am I spending money on that doesn't bring me any joy or move me toward my goals? And what would my ideal financial life look like in 5 years? The answers to these questions become the foundation for a budget that feels like a roadmap to the life you want, instead of a punishment for the life you have. She also talks about the importance of fun money, money you can spend on whatever you want without having to justify it to anyone, including yourself. This sounds frivolous, but Rachel argues it's actually crucial for long-term financial success because it prevents the kind of budget rebellion that leads people to blow their whole plan on one emotional spending spree. If you know you have permission to spend some money on things that just make you happy, you're less likely to feel deprived and more likely to stick to your plan. The fourth concept that absolutely changed my perspective is what Rachel calls the gratitude practice for money. This isn't some woo-woo manifestation thing. It's actually a practical strategy for rewiring your brain to notice what you have instead of constantly focusing on what you're missing. Rachel noticed that people who struggled with comparison spending had trained themselves to look for lack everywhere they went. They would walk into their own home and immediately notice what needed to be updated, upgraded, or replaced. They would look at their wardrobe and see only the gaps, the pieces they didn't have, instead of the perfectly good clothes hanging right in front of them. They had become experts at seeing what was wrong with their lives instead of what was working. So Rachel developed this practice where every morning, before checking social media or looking at any kind of aspirational content, you spend 2 minutes writing down 3 things you're genuinely grateful for in your financial life.
Not big dramatic things, just simple stuff like having enough money for coffee, being able to pay your rent without stress, or having a job that covers your basic needs.
The point isn't to make yourself feel guilty for wanting more. It's to remind your brain that you're actually doing better than you think you are. Rachel tried this with a client who was constantly stressed about money, despite having a steady job and no major debt. This person would wake up every morning and immediately start mentally cataloging everything they needed to buy, fix, or upgrade. Their first thoughts were always about scarcity and lack. After a month of the gratitude practice, they noticed they felt calmer about money and made fewer impulse purchases because they weren't operating from a constant sense of not having enough. They still had financial goals and things they wanted to work toward, but those goals came from a place of excitement about the future instead of anxiety about the present. Let me tell you what hit me hardest about this book. Rachel talks about how comparison-driven spending isn't just hurting our bank accounts, it's stealing our ability to enjoy the life we're actually living. She tells this story about a family vacation where instead of playing with their kids on the beach, the parents spent most of their time taking photos that would look good on social media and worrying about whether their hotel was as nice as their friend's vacation spot. They were physically present for this amazing experience with their family, but mentally they were somewhere else entirely, comparing their real life to everyone else's highlight reel. By the end of the trip, they realized they had spent thousands of dollars on a vacation they barely experienced because they were too busy trying to make it look perfect online. Rachel's point isn't that you should never take photos or share good moments. It's that when the performance becomes more important than the experience, you've lost the whole point. You're spending money to create content for an audience instead of memories for yourself. The final big idea that ties everything together is what Rachel calls living your values out loud. This means making financial decisions that are so aligned with what you actually care about that you don't need to explain or defend them to anyone. If someone questions why you drive an older car, you can genuinely say it's because you'd rather spend money on travel. If someone wonders why you don't eat out as much, you can honestly say it's because you're saving for something that matters more to you. If someone doesn't understand why you're not keeping up with the latest trends, you can simply say you're more interested in building something lasting than looking like everyone else. Rachel shares her own story about choosing to be debt-free instead of having a mortgage on a bigger house. Some people thought she was crazy for not leveraging her money the way everyone else does, but she realized that for her, the peace of mind that came with owing nothing to anyone was worth more than the extra square footage or the potential investment returns. She valued freedom and security over appearance and optimization, and once she got clear on that, the decision became easy. The beautiful thing about living your values out loud is that it makes you immune to most comparison traps because you're not trying to impress people who value different things than you do. If someone is impressed by expensive cars and you value experiences over possessions, their opinion about your transportation choices literally doesn't matter. If someone thinks you should be climbing the corporate ladder faster and you value work-life balance over maximum earnings, their career advice isn't relevant to your life. You're not being stubborn or defensive. You're just living according to a different set of priorities, and that's completely okay. As we wrap up, here's what I want you to take away from Rachel's message. Your financial life doesn't have to look like anyone else's for it to be successful, fulfilling, or worthy of respect. The person who saves every penny might be just as happy as the person who spends freely. The person who chooses experiences over possessions might be just as content as the person who loves beautiful things. The person who prioritizes security might sleep just as well as the person who takes big financial risks. The only wrong way to handle money is to let other people's values drive your decisions. Rachel's book isn't about becoming extremely frugal or giving up everything you enjoy. It's about becoming extremely intentional about aligning your money with your actual life instead of some imaginary life you think you're supposed to want. When you stop spending your future on someone else's highlight reel and start investing in your own real, imperfect, but genuinely yours version of happiness, something amazing happens. You stop feeling like you're behind, you stop feeling like you're missing out, and you start feeling like you're exactly where you're supposed to be, building something that's actually worth building.